The wind came howling down off Black Hollow Ridge that night. Cold, mean, the kind that slips through a man's coat like a knife and reminds him he's mortal. Up on that lonesome shoulder of rock, a broken soul knelt in the mud beside a fresh-dug grave. The seventh in a grim row of wooden crosses standing silent against the storm. Rain lashed his face. His hands, black with dirt and blood, gripped the cold steel of his Colt. He pressed the barrel tight beneath his jaw, thumb on the hammer. Finger brushing the trigger. Lightning had taken the last one. Or so they whispered down in Twin Rivers. Accidents, they called them. A curse older than the pines themselves. One squeeze and it would all be over. But in the roar of thunder and the driving rain, something darker than grief clawed its way up from the black hollow of his heart. A single poison question that refused to die. What if it weren't the mountain? What if it weren't him at all? The gun trembled. The wind carried the whisper down toward the flickering lights of the valley, where a man in a black coat slept easy behind shutter-shuttered windows but the storm knew better. And storms like that, they don't stay quiet forever.
The wind came down off the mountains that night. Cold, mean. The kind of wind that finds the cracks in a man's coat and reminds him he is mortal. Cole Ravenheart did not feel it. He could not feel anything anymore. His knees were sunk in the wet earth of Black Hollow Ridge. His hands were black with dirt and blood. The shovel lay beside him. The hole was deep enough. The hole was always deep enough. Cordelia. Her name kept circling in his head like a dog that would not lie down. Cordelia, his seventh, his last. The one he had promised himself would be the one he kept alive. He had been wrong, he was always wrong. The lightning had come out of nowhere. October sky black as pitch. They had been walking back from the creek with a string of trout. She was laughing, because he had told some joke. He could not even remember the joke now, just her laugh, just the way her hand had been in his. And then white light, the smell of burnt cedar. And she was gone, just like that. Cole pulled the canvas back from her face one last time. He looked at her, he memorized her. 26 years old, hair the color of wheat. A small scar on her chin from when she fell off a horse at 12. He knew every inch of her. He had known every inch of all of them. And now she would lie next to the others, 6 headstones already, now 7. He lowered her into the ground himself. He would not let anyone help. There was no one to help, anyway. The mountain men who used to ride with him had stopped coming around years ago. The town had stopped sending preachers. Even the Sin Eater from Lairfamy had refused his last letter. A cursed man buries his own dead. That was the rule. The rain started as he shoveled the dirt back in. Cole worked through it, shovel, lift, drop. His arms were numb, his shoulders burned. His ribs ached from where he had ridden too hard to get her home before the storm. It had not mattered. Nothing he ever did mattered. When the last shovelful was patted down, Cole stood. He stood for a long time in the rain. He looked at the row. 7 women, 7 names he had whispered in the dark. Cole pulled his Colt from its holster. He looked at it. The metal was wet. The grip was warm from being against his side. He turned it around, pressed the barrel up under his chin. Felt the cold steel against the soft place beneath his jaw. His thumb found the hammer, his finger found the trigger. And then, something stopped him, not God. He had given up on God a long time ago, not hope. Hope had been buried with Lillian back in '66. It was something smaller. It was a question. What if it was not him? What if all these years he had been blaming himself for something he did not do? The thought came unbidden. Quiet. Like a stranger in the next room. He had had it before, pushed it away every time. But tonight, kneeling over her grave with rain, running down his collar, he let himself hold it. What if someone wanted them dead? What if there was a reason? Cole lowered the gun. He stared at the row. I am going to find out, he said to them, out loud, like they could hear him. I swear on every one of you, I'm going to find out. The wind took his words and carried them down the mountain. And somewhere down in Twin Rivers, a man with a black coat slept easy. Because nobody had ever asked the right questions about the cursed man on Black Hollow Ridge. Not yet.
3 weeks later, Twin Rivers was washing its linens and pretending it was a normal town. It was not a normal town. It was a town that had learned to whisper. Prudence Whitlock walked down Main Street with a basket of bandages on her hip and a jaw set hard enough to crack walnuts. She was tall in a way that made men step off the boardwalk to let her pass, 6 feet and 1 inch in her stockings. 200 pounds of muscle and bone and patience worn down to a thread. People called her Prue when they were being polite. When they were not, they called her other things. She heard them today. Their shigzos, Lord have mercy. Look at the size of her. You could plow 40 acres with that one. The voice was Silas Thackeray's. She did not have to turn around. She knew that voice the way a hen knows the shadow of a hawk. Silas leaned on the rail outside the saloon. He was a thin man, slick black hair, eyes the color of pond ice, wore a black coat even in summer, had been the loudest mouth in Twin Rivers for as long as Prue could remember. Miss Whitlock, he called, you sure you do not want a husband? I know a fella in Cheyenne. Says he needs a wife who can pull a plow. The men around him laughed. Prue kept walking. She did not turn. She did not stop. She did not give Silas Thackeray 1 inch of her face, because that was the rule. The rule was, do not bleed in front of wolves. Inside her chest, though. Inside her chest she was a fist. She made it to her father's surgery, pushed open the door, set the basket down, closed the door behind her, and then, only then, she allowed herself one shaking breath. You hear them, her father said from the back room. I always hear them, Papa. Edmund Whitlock came out, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was a small man, thin shoulders, spectacles. The opposite of his daughter in every visible way. But he had her eyes, the same steady gray, the same refusal to look away from anything ugly. I will go talk to him. Do not, Prudence, do not, Papa. She set the bandages on the counter. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. That was the thing about being Prue Whitlock. Your hands had to be steady. Because nobody else's were. You stitched the Haggerty boy's foot last night and walked home alone in the dark, her father said. You hauled the Carroll's cow out of a sinkhole last week. You set Mr. Buford's broken arm when he was twice your age and 3 times your fool. And these men. They laugh at you like you are a sideshow. Yes, it is unbearable. Yes. Why do you bear it? Prue looked at him. Because the alternative, she said, is becoming someone who does not. Edmund stood there a long moment, his eyes wet. He shook his head and went back into the surgery. Prue rolled up her sleeves. There was work to do. There was always work to do.
She went out at dawn the next morning. The basket on her arm was empty. She meant to fill it with willow bark and yarrow and the late-season chamomile that grew in the crook of the creek where the water ran fast. The air was cold. The leaves were down. The cottonwoods along the creek bank had gone bone yellow and were shedding fast. Prue loved this hour. This was the hour the world forgot to be cruel. She bent over a patch of yarrow. Her fingers worked quickly. Snip, bundle. Tie. Into the basket, and then she heard it shout a man's voice, far off, up the trail where the rocks rose into the foothills. Then a gunshot. Prue's head snapped up, then another shot, then a third. She did not think. Prue Whitlock had stopped thinking through danger when she was 11 years old and pulled her drowning cousin out of the river. Thinking was for men who had time. Prue did not have time. She dropped the basket. She ran. Her boots hit the trail hard. Her skirt was in the way. She hiked it up to her knees and ran faster. Her lungs burned. Her hair came loose. The shots kept coming, then nothing, then a different sound, a man cursing. Low, steady. Like he was used to dying and was simply commenting on it. She came around a bend in the trail and stopped. A clearing. A creek. A horse on its side, breathing hard, blood on its flank. And 3 men with guns, and 1 man on the ground. The man on the ground had his back against a boulder. His left leg was twisted under him. His right hand held a Colt. The Colt was empty. He was loading it. He was loading it slow because his fingers were slick with blood. The 3 men were closing in. The biggest one laughed. Come on, Ravenheart, you out yet. Drop the iron, Ravenheart. The name went through Prue like a struck bell. Ravenheart, the cursed one. The mountain man with the row of graves on his ridge. She had never seen him. She was seeing him now. He was big, bigger than her, even sitting down. Dark hair, a beard streaked with rust, and when he looked up from his Colt, his eyes were the color of an iron sky in February. He saw her. For 1/2 second, his expression changed. Not fear, not relief. Confusion, like he was not sure he was seeing right. The biggest man followed his gaze, turned, and there was Prue, 200 pounds of her, hair come loose, skirt up, empty hands. The bandit grinned. Well now, what is this? The cursed man calling in his womenfolk. His friends laughed. Prue did not laugh. Prue was looking at the log. It was lying along the side of the trail. Cottonwood, about 6 feet long. Thick as a man's thigh. The kind of log a woodcutter might leave to season for a year before splitting it. Prue bent. She got her arms under it. She stood up. The bandit's grin started to slip. Ladies, he said. What are you? She charged. She did not yell. Prue never yelled. She just ran. 200 pounds of woman, 200 pounds of log, 400 pounds of fury moving downhill at a man who had been about to murder somebody. She hit him. The log hit him. She felt his ribs go. She heard them go. He went down with a noise that was not a scream. It was something smaller, something more honest. The noise a man makes when he understands he was wrong about the world. The other two froze. That was their mistake. Prue dropped the log, bent, picked up a rock the size of her own head, held it up. Boys, she said, calm as Sunday. I will plant this in your face. Decide quick. They decided quick. They ran for their horses. They did not even look back at the one on the ground. He was crawling, whimpering. He would be all right. Probably. Eventually, Prue watched them go until the dust settled, then she dropped the rock, then her hand started to shake. Just a little. Only she could see it.
She turned to the man against the boulder. He had not moved. He was still holding the Colt with the loaded chamber halfway in. He was staring at her like she was something he had read about in a book and did not quite believe was real. You, he said. His voice was raw. You just yes. With the log, yes. By yourself. There was nobody else here. He laughed. It came out cracked. Like he had forgotten how. He laughed and then he winced and grabbed his ribs. Lady, he said. Who in God's name are you? Prudence Whitlock. My father is the doctor in Twin Rivers. She knelt beside him. Her hands were already moving, already at his leg, already running the practice check her father had taught her. Do not move. Your leg is not broken, but it is a bad sprain. 3 cracked ribs at least. Maybe 4. You are bleeding from somewhere I cannot see yet. Hold still. You should run. I beg your pardon, lady. Miss Whitlock. He grabbed her wrist. His hand was huge. Hot, trembling. Run. Down the trail now. Do not touch me. Do not look at me. Just go. Prue looked at his hand on her wrist. She looked at his face. She gently pulled her hand out of his. Mr. Ravenheart, she said. His eyes widened. You know me. I know of you? Then run. No, lady. My name is Prudence. She pressed her palm against the worst of the bleeding. He hissed. And I have not run from her anything in my life. I am not about to start with a half-dead mountain man on the wrong end of a sprained leg. He stared at her. He was still staring at her when she got him onto her shoulder. She carried him 5 miles on her shoulder. 5 miles down the trail with a 200-pound man slung across her back like a feed sack, and his horse limping along behind on her lead rope. Cole Ravenheart kept trying to slide off and walk. She kept telling him to hold still. He kept telling her to put him down. She kept ignoring him. By the 3rd mile, he stopped arguing. By the fourth mile, she felt his hand on her shoulder, not gripping, just resting, like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to lean on somebody. Twin Rivers stopped what it was doing when she came down Main Street. Mrs. Hatchett dropped a basket of eggs. Old Bowman pulled his hat off, then put it back on, then pulled it off again. The schoolmaster came out of the schoolhouse and walked into a hitching post. The whispers started before she had gone 20 feet. That is him. Lord have mercy. That is Ravenheart. She's carrying him. On her back, she touched him. She is done for. The girl is done for. Prue did not slow down. She did not look up. She did not adjust the man on her shoulder. Even though her knees were beginning to scream and her back was a sheet of fire, she walked straight to her father's surgery, kicked the door open with her boot. Walked in, Papa, she said. Clear the table.
Edmund Whitlock turned around. He saw the man on his daughter's back. He saw who the man was. His face went the color of buttermilk. Prudence, he whispered. Now, Papa. He moved. He cleared the table. She lowered Cole down. The man groaned. His silver eyes found her face and stayed there. Edmund came over with his bag. His hands were shaking. Prudence, daughter. You know who this is. I know he is. 7. I know, Papa. You should not have, Papa. She turned and looked at her father. Just looked at him. He was bleeding, and then 3 men decided who was going to put the last bullet. Were you going to ask me to walk past? Edmund opened his mouth, closed it. He nodded once. He started to work. Cole watched the doctor cut his shirt away. Bai did not flinch. He did not make a sound. His eyes never left Prue's face. You should have left me, he said. Prue was washing her hands in the cold lye soap. You said that already. I will say it until you listen. Then you will be saying it a long time. Why? She stopped. Her hands in the water, the bubbles foaming up around her fingers. She did not look at him. Because, she said, when I am an old woman, I want to be able to tell my own ghost that I never once chose to walk past a dying man, not even when the world told me he was cursed. Cole was silent. Edmund kept working. The room smelled like soap and copper and pine smoke from the stove. Miss Whitlock, Cole said very quietly, you are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the foolishest. She turned to face him, wiped her hands on her apron. Both, she said. It is usually both.
He slept that night. He slept hard, drugged sleep. The kind that comes after laudanum and trauma, and a body that has finally been allowed to stop fighting. Prue sat in the chair beside the table. She did not sleep. She watched his chest rise and fall. She counted the breaths, 16 a minute, then 14. Then 12. As he sank deeper, she watched his hands. They were big hands, working hands. The knuckles were scarred. The right one had a long pale line that ran from the wrist up between the first and second fingers, a bayonet scar. Her father had served in the war. She knew a bayonet scar. She thought about that for a long time. When morning came, his eyes as opened. Slow, like a man swimming up from the bottom of a deep cold pond. He saw her. He blinked. You stayed, I stayed, all night, all night. He turned his head a little, winced. Why, in case you woke up confused and tried to walk on that leg. He almost smiled. That all, and in case you tried to leave. You expected I would try to leave. I expected you would try. He was quiet. I would have tried, he said. I know. He looked at the ceiling. The pine boards. The lantern hanging from the hook. He looked at it for a long time. Miss Whitlock, Prue, yes. You ever heard of the Battle of Gettysburg? She turned her head a little. I have. I was at Gettysburg. You were Confederate. I was 23 years old and from Tennessee, and I did what my father told me. By the third day, I was carrying a boy from Mississippi off the field on my back. He died about half a mile in. I kept carrying him because I did not know where else to put him. He was looking at the ceiling still. I came west after. Tried to be alone. Got tired of being alone. Married Lillian in '66. The first one. Tell me their names. She said. He looked at her then. What, all 7? Tell me their names. His throat worked. He looked back at the ceiling. Lillian, Adelaide, Beatrice, Constance, Mirabelle, Henrietta, Cordelia. How did they die? Prue. How did they die? Cole. His silver eyes filled. He did not let it show on his face, but she saw it in his eyes. Lillian had a fever after the baby came. Both of them died. Adelaide was thrown by a horse while I was hunting. Beatrice took the smallpox in '70.
Stairs in the cabin.
His voice cracked.
I built those stairs.
Mirabelle walked out into a blizzard. Said she heard somebody calling. She did not come back. Henrietta got bit by a snake when we were picking blueberries. I tried to suck the poison, was not quick enough. And Cordelia, his hand gripped the edge of the table. Cordelia was struck by lightning. About a month ago, we were walking home. She let him stop. She let the silence hold him. Outside, the town was beginning its day. A wagon clattered down Main Street. A rooster crowed. Mrs. Hatchett's voice could be heard scolding her dog. Cole, Prue said. Yes, do you have a picture of them? His brow furrowed. Of who? Of all 7? Why? I want to see them. He stared at her. Most people, he said, are afraid of them. Most people are fools. He reached, slow, into the breast pocket of his coat where it lay folded on the chair. He took out a small leather wallet. From it he drew a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. She unfolded it. It was a picture drawn in pencil by a clearly skilled hand. 7 women, some sitting, some standing, arranged like a portrait. Each with a name written underneath in careful printing. She looked at it a long time. You drew this, she said. I drew this. You drew them all from memory. I drew them all from memory. Cole, yes. Each of these women died different. Sickness. Falling. A horse. A snake. A storm. Lightning. She looked up at him. Her eyes were steady. Curses do not pick that many different methods. He stared at her. What are you saying? I am saying somebody might have picked them for you. The silence in the room changed. It got bigger, it got colder. Cole Ravenheart pushed himself up on his elbows. The pain went through him. He did not care. Say that again. I am saying, Prue said, that maybe nobody Cole. Maybe somebody just wanted us to think they did. He breathed, and somewhere very deep in him, something that had been buried for 9 years began, very slowly, to move.
It was that afternoon that Silas Thackeray came to the door. Prue was at the back of the surgery, grinding herbs. She heard her father answer the door. She heard Silas's voice, low, polite, false, Dr. Whitlock. A word. She set down the pestle. She walked to the front room. Silas Thackeray was on the porch. Behind him on the road were 5 men. Hank Dobbs from the saloon, Jeremiah Toll, the freighter, 2 cattle hands she did not know by name, and 1 boy she did, Eli Marsh. 16 years old. She had stitched his palm last spring when he cut it on a fence wire. He looked at the boards now, would not meet her eye. Silas's pale gaze found her. He smiled, Miss Whitlock. The town has concerns. The town is welcome to them. You have taken in a man who has buried 7 wives. He did not bury them on my doorstep, Mr. Thackeray. Silas's smile thinned. There is a matter of public safety. There is a matter, Prue said. Of you standing on my father's porch with 5 men at your back like you came to do something brave. Edmund put a hand on her arm. She did not shake it off, but she did not move either. Silas took a half step forward. He was 3 inches shorter than her. He had to look up. He hated that. She could see it. You are a strange woman, Miss Wilmslock, so I'll tell you ought to be more careful. Why? He spread his hands. Cursed men carry their curses on their breath, and the women near them tend to die in interesting ways. There it was, the threat so gentle, so polished, so plausibly deniable. Prue looked at him, really looked at him, the black coat, the slick hair, the cold, pale eyes. The way his hand drifted, just a little, toward the small of his back where she could see the outline of something tucked into his belt. A man who threatened a doctor's daughter while her father stood right there. A man who liked it. A man who had done this before. She picked up the splitting axe that leaned against the porch post. Her father always kept it there for kindling. She lifted it in one hand, casually, like it weighed nothing. She took it down to the big piece of fieldstone by the steps, the one her father used as a mounting block. She raised the axe, she brought it down, the fieldstone cracked, clean down the middle. The 2 halves fell apart with a sound like a closed book being slammed. She set the axe back against the post. She turned to Silas Thackeray. Mr. Thackeray, she said, if anything happens to my father, or to me, or to my patient, I will know who to come for, and I will not be carrying an axe. The men behind Silas had gone very still. Eli Marsh was pale. Silas's smile did something interesting. It flickered, like a candle in a draught. Then it came back. Good day. Miss Whitlock, good day, Mr. Thackeray. He turned. He walked off the porch. The 5 men followed him. None of them looked back. When they were gone, Edmund leaned against the doorframe and put his hand over his face. Prudence, I know, Papa. They will not forget that, I know. They will come back, I know. He lowered his hand, looked at her. What are you going to do? She looked out at the street where Silas Thackeray's black coat was disappearing into the mouth of the saloon. I am going up the mountain with him, Papa. What, with Cole, when he can ride? I am going up to that cabin. I am going to read his wives' diaries, if there are any. I am going to walk to the spot where each of them died. I am going to find out what really killed them. Prudence, it was not a curse, Papa. She turned back to him. Her gray eyes were lit up like a stove door had opened in them. Somebody murdered 7 women. And somebody let 1 man take the blame for 9 years, and I am going to find out who. Edmund Whitlock looked at his daughter, his large, terrifying, brilliant, bone-stubborn daughter. He thought about telling her no. He thought about it for a full second. Then he said, What do you need me to pack? She crossed the room. She wrapped her arms around her small father. She held him. Just trust me, Papa, she whispered. Just trust me one more time. Out on the sports leaned against the post in the late autumn light, above the town on the dark line of Black Hollow Ridge. A row of graves waited for someone to come ask the right questions.
And in the back room of the surgery, Cole Ravenheart was awake. He had heard every word. He lay on the table looking at the ceiling. His eyes were wet. His hand was over his mouth. And for the first time since the night he had buried Cordelia in the rain. He let himself hope the next morning, while Prue changed his bandages, Edmund came in carrying a cup of coffee. He set it on the table beside Cole's hand. He cleared his throat. Mr. Ravenheart, doctor, you will be on this table about 10 more days. After that, 2 more weeks before you can ride a mountain trail. All right, long enough for you to think about something. What? Edmund looked at his daughter, in a man's apron, with a roll of bandage in her teeth and her braid half undone. He looked back at Cole. My daughter is going up that mountain with you, Edmund said. I cannot stop her. I have never been able to stop her, but I want you to understand. If anything happens to her up there, I will not need a sheriff. I will come up that mountain myself. And I am 61 years old, and I have buried a wife, and I am not afraid of much. Cole was quiet a long moment. Then he said, Doctor, yes. I am more afraid of what happens to her than you are. I promise you that. Edmund studied him. Edmund nodded. Drink your coffee, said. He left. Prue did not look up from the bandage, but the corner of her mouth was turning up.
They left Twin Rivers on the second Tuesday of November. The sky was the color of a tin pail. The air smelled like coming snow. Prue had packed the wagon herself the night before. Bandages, laudanum, her father's old surgical kit, a box of his medical books, her own notebook, brand new, bound in brown leather, with a pencil tied to a string in the spine's mine. She had also packed a Henry rifle and a box of cartridges. Edmund had not asked her about the rifle. She had not offered. Cole rode beside the wagon on his bay. The leg was healing. The ribs were not. He sat his horse like a man who had been told there was no other option, which was the truth. Behind them, the town watched them leave. Prue could feel it. The eyes from windows, the half-pulled curtains, Mrs. Hatchett pretending to sweep porch for the third time in an hour, Ellie Marsh standing in front of the schoolhouse, hands in his pockets, looking at the boards under his feet, and Silas Thackeray. Silas Thackeray on the saloon porch. Silas Thackeray with one foot up on the rail. Silas Thackeray raising his coffee cup to her like a man toasting a bride. Prue did not look at him. She did not have to. She felt his eyes on her back the way you feel a hand reaching for your hair in the dark. Just before they reached the edge of town, an old man stepped out of the land office. He was thin, stooped, white hair at the temples. He held a battered hat in his hand. Miss Whitlock. She drew up. Mr. Ashworth, Pete Ashworth, was the bookkeep at the land office. He had been the bookkeep at the land office since before Prue was born. He knew every deed in the territory. He knew which rancher had borrowed against which parcel. He knew where every property line ran. And he was the only old man in Twin Rivers who had never once laughed at her in 14 years, miss, he said. I have been thinking about something. Since yesterday, yes, Mr. Ravenheart's deed up there on Black Hollow. Cole's head turned. What about it? Cole said. Pete Ashworth looked at him, looked back at Prue. There is something funny about it, Pete said. I cannot put my finger on what. But I have been pulling old papers, and the more I pull, the funnier it gets. I will keep pulling. While you are gone, Mr. Ashworth, miss, pull all of them. He nodded. He put his hat on. Be careful up there, miss. I will. He is a strange man. Mr. Thackeray. She looked at him. He looked at her. Two people understanding each other without saying it. I know, she said. He stepped back. She clicked her tongue at the team. The wagon moved on.
The trail to Black Hollow Ridge was a hard climb. It got harder. By the third day, they were above the cottonwoods and into the pines. The air thinned. The wind picked up. Cole's horse picked its way along a switchback with its ears flat. Prue rode a chestnut mare she had named Mercy. She did not need help getting on the horse. She did not need help getting off. She did not need help with the wagon at all, because she had given the wagon to a man with a freight crew at the foot of the trail and traded him for a pack mule. The mule's name was Ezekiel. The mule did not like Cole. He is looking at me, Cole said. He is a mule. He looks at everybody. He is looking at me different. You smell like trouble. He can tell. That's so. Mules can always tell. Cole almost laughed. Almost. He had not laughed all the way out loud yet, but he was getting closer. They came into the clearing at dusk on the fourth day. Prue saw the cabin first. It sat in a meadow on a small flat shoulder of the mountain. Logs. Steep pitched roof. A stovepipe. A barn behind it, sagging on one side. A spring house. A small fenced garden gone to weeds. And on the slope above the cabin, the row, 7 mounds, 7 wooden crosses, lined up like soldiers at parade rest. Prue sat very still on her horse and looked at them. Cole did not look at them. He looked at her. He was waiting, she understood. He was waiting to see if she was going to flinch. I am not going to flinch, she said. I did not ask. Yes, you did. She rode past him to the cabin.
She slept on the floor in front of the hearth. That first night, Cole offered her the bed. Prue declined. Cole offered the bed twice. Prue declined twice. Cole said, "It was my wife's bed." Prue said, "Which one?" Cole was quiet a long moment. The firelight moved on his face. "All of them," he said. Prue looked at him over the rim of her tin cup of tea. "Then I will slam the floor." He did not argue again. The first morning, Prue did 3 things. She walked the perimeter of the cabin with a stick and counted 26 steps from the back door to the foot of the slope where the row began. She climbed up to the row, read each cross, touched each one. Then she came back to the cabin and said, "Cole, yes. Tell me where Lillian fell sick." Cole pointed to the bedroom, right there. "After that baby, tell me where Adelaide was thrown." He pointed past the barn, south pasture, about 400 yards out. "Tell me where Beatrice took the smallpox, all over. We had it in the cabin 3 weeks. I carried her down to the spring house at the end. She wanted cool air. Tell me where Constance fell." He hesitated. Then he pointed at the pine staircase that ran up the inside wall to the loft, top step. She was carrying laundry. Prue looked at the staircase. She walked over to it. She climbed it. She came back down. "Cole, yes. That top step is loose." Cole stared at her. "What? It is loose. The brace underneath. Look." She crouched. She tipped the lantern toward the brace. Cole came over. He bent down. He looked.
He looked a long time. Cole, do not. This brace is sawn. Prue, look at the cut. Cole, that is not a break. That is a saw cut. 3/4 of the way through. So it would hold. Until wait, Cole's hand was over his mouth. His silver eyes were very wide. He did not breathe for a long time. Then he said very quietly, I built those stairs. Yes. I check those stairs every spring. Yes. That brace was solid 2 springs back, and Constance died 1 winter back. He sat down on the floor, hard like his legs had stopped knowing how to be legs. Prue did not crowd him. She knelt on the floor near him. She put her notebook on her knee. She wrote in pencil, in her square steady hand, Constance, staircase, top step, brace sawn 3/4 through, not a fall, a trap. Then she put the notebook down. She put one hand on Cole's shoulder. The shoulder shook, just once. Then he got hold of himself. Prue did not move her hand. She left it there a long time, outside. The wind moved through the pines and made a sound like the world taking a long, slow breath.
She found the second piece of evidence 3 days later in the loft. She had asked Cole's permission to go through the trunks up there. He had said, There is nothing up there, she had said. May I look anyway, he had said. Go ahead. The loft was dust and quiet and cold. 3 trunks. A broken cradle. A folded patchwork quilt with mouse holes in it. The light came in slanted through a small gable window. She opened the first trunk, wedding clothes, 7 of them. Folded carefully, the oldest at the bottom. Prue stopped breathing for a second when she realized what she was looking at. He had kept their wedding dresses, all 7 folded. Ironed, wrapped in tissue. Like a man who had told himself he was going to send them home to their mothers, and never quite managed to do it. She closed that trunk. Carefully, reverently, she opened the second, children's things, a tiny knit cap, a wooden rattle, a baby blanket. She closed that one fast. The third trunk was different. The third trunk had a lock on it. The lock was open. The hasp had been left dangling, like somebody had been in it recently and forgotten. Prue lifted the lid. Books. Notebooks, diaries. She counted them 5 small leather-bound diaries. 5 different hands. She lifted them out one at a time and read the names written inside the front cover. Adelaide, Beatrice, Constance, Mirabelle, Cordelia. 5 women. 5 voices. 5 small, careful records of marriage and weather, and what was for supper and which calf was about to be born. She sat down cross-legged on the loft floor with her skirt pooled around her like a tablecloth. She started with Cordelia, because Cordelia was newest, because Cordelia's grief was still bright enough that Cole would have to sit with it before he could see anything else. She read for an hour. Cordelia had a steady hand, a funny eye. She wrote about Cole as if he were a piece of weather she was very fond of. She wrote about the dirt that came to the salt block. She wrote about a dream she had had where her mother was alive again. And then, a page dated September 28, 1874, Prue read it twice, then a third time. Her hands began to be cold. She read it out loud, very softly, to nobody but herself. There was a man at the door today while Cole was hunting. He said he was a friend from town. I did not know him. He wore a black coat. He asked if I was happy here. I said yes. He said you bane for a happy young wife to have an accident. He said the others. He said. The others had had accidents. He said it as if he had known them. I am writing this in the loft. I will not show it to Cole. I do not want him to tell him on Sunday. We are going to walk to the lookout on Sunday. The weather is supposed to be fine. That was the last entry. Prue sat very still. The lookout. The walk on Sunday, the lightning. She remembered the entry, October 4, 1874. Lightning out of nowhere. Cordelia had been killed before she could tell her husband what had happened at the door. Prue closed the diary. She held it against her chest for a long moment. Her eyes burned, but she did not cry. She did not cry on the job. That was a rule.
She climbed back down out of the loft. Cole was at the table cleaning a rifle. He looked up. He saw her face. The rag in his hand stopped moving. Prue, Cole, what? Sit down. I'm sitting. Sit down harder. He set the rifle aside. She put the diary in front of him. She turned it open to the page. She turned it sideways so he could read it. She pointed to the place to start. He read. His face did not change at first. Then it did. It had changed in a small way that was almost worse than if he had screamed. His hand on the table closed into a fist. The fist began to shake. The fist, very gently, very quietly, turned over and pressed the diary closed. He held the diary down with his palm flat on top of it as if it might try to lift itself off the table and fly away. Cole, do not, Cole, Prue. Do not, I have to say it, Prue. Please, somebody killed her, Cole. He bent forward over the table. His forehead almost touched the wood. His whole body curled around the diary and the table and the years. His shoulders shook, but he made no sound. Prue went around the table and stood beside him. She did not touch him. She just stood there. A tall woman in a kitchen, watching a big man come apart. After a long time, he straightened. He wiped his face on his sleeve. His eyes were red and dry. "How many?" he said. His voice was not his voice. It was something cracked open. "How many of them?" "I do not know yet, Prue. I am going to find out. Prue, Cole, look at me." He looked at her. "I am going to find out." He nodded once. Then he stood up. He walked to the wall. He took down the Colt. He started to load it. Prue watched him put 6 in the cylinder. Prue watched him spin it. Prue watched him reach for his coat. Prue said, "Cole," he said, "I am going to town. Cole, I am going to find out who he is, and I am going to put a bullet through his eye. Cole, Prue." "Move." She did not move. She was standing in front of the door. Cole stopped. The Colt was at his side. Pointed at the floor. His eyes were on her face. She was the calmest she had ever been in her life. "Cole," she said, "if you go down that mountain right now and put a bullet through a man's eye, you will hang for it. I do not care. I do. Prue, you hang for it. They bury you in a town graveyard, and they put a stone that says he was the cursed man after all. And the man who did this to those women goes home to his supper. And somebody tells your story for the next 60 years, and they get it wrong every time." He stared at her. The Colt was very still in his hand. "Cole, listen to me." She did not raise the voice. She did not need to. You do not get justice with one bullet in the dark. You get justice with a sheriff and a judge and 12 men looking at evidence. You get justice in front of God and the town that watched you bury those women, so they can never, ever, look at you the way they have for 9 years. Ever again, he breathed. His chest was working. "Prue, yes. I have wanted to kill that man for years, and I did not even know who he was. I know. What if I cannot help it? You can. How do you know? Because." She put one hand very lightly on the wrist holding the Colt. "Because for 9 years you have wanted to kill yourself. And you did not, so you can hold off on killing him too." His eyes filled. He set the Colt down on the table, lowly, deliberately, like a man laying down a snake without dropping it. Prue moved. Just enough. She put her arms around him. It was the first time she had touched him perfect. He stood there inside her arms like a man who had not been held by anyone in 9 years, because he had not been held by anyone in 9 years. He put his arms around her. After a while, he put his forehead down on her shoulder pad. He did not weep. He simply rested. Outside, the first snow of the year began to fall.
They did not go down to town. Not yet. Prue would not let him. Prue had a plan. Prue's plan was that they would gather every shred of evidence they could lay their hands on first. And then they would go down once and only once, and they would go to the sheriff and not the saloon. Cole did not like the plan. Cole agreed to tie the plan. That was the difference between Cole now and Cole 9 years ago. Cole now was a man who could agree to a plan. Prue read every diary, cover to cover, by the fire. She made a list of names. Adelaide had written about a man. A man came up the trail today and said he was lost. He had a black coat and a strange smile. I gave him water. He asked about Cole. I did not like his eyes. That entry was dated 3 weeks before Adelaide was thrown by her horse and broke her neck on a rock. Beatrice had written about a man too. A traveler stopped by today and said he had had the smallpox as a boy and could not catch it again. He sat with us a little while because Cole was glad of company. I think he coughed once into his sleeve when he thought I was not looking. Beatrice was dead in a month. Mirabelle had written, I am being called outside at night. I have heard a man's voice 4 times now. I do not tell Cole, because Cole will go out and look and there is no vet or anyone there. I am beginning to think I am going mad. Last night the voice said it was time for me to go. Mirabelle had walked out into the blizzard the next week and never come home. Constance had written, we had a guest for supper tonight. Cole's old friend from Twin Rivers. He brought a bottle. He toasted us. He toasted the cabin. He toasted oddly the staircase. That was the entry from a week before Constance fell. Prue wrote the names in her book, a man, a traveler, a voice, a guest. A friend. A black coat, a strange smile, pale eyes. She did not write Silas Thackeray's name. Not yet, she did not need to. Her hand was already shaking when she wrote pale eyes. The 3rd week, the snow came in earnest, 8 inches in one night. Cole woke before dawn and went out to break the ice on the spring with a maul. Prue woke later. She came outside in her father's old greatcoat and a pair of his trousers because she had finally given up on doing chores in skirts. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed Cole one. He took it without looking at her. He drank. The steam curled up around his beard. He said, I have to ask you something. Ask, why are you doing this? Because somebody has to. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Prue, Cole, why are you doing this? She looked at him. He was looking at the trees. She thought about the question. She thought about it longer than she had thought about anything in a long time. Because, she said, when I was 12 years old, my mother died of typhoid, and the women in town, the good women, the church women, came around to bring food, and I heard one of them tell another that it was God's will. And I heard the other one say, well, it is a mercy. Their girl is so big. She will need that little house all to herself when her father goes. Cole turned his head. He looked at her. She meant, Prue said, that I was never going to have a husband, and I might as well plan to die alone. Prue, I was 12, Cole. I was 12 years old, listening to two women I had brought biscuits to, calmly assume my whole life into the grave, Prue. And then, right after, my father took me into his surgery and showed me how to set a broken arm. She wiped her face with the back of her glove. He said, Prudence. People will tell you stories about who you are. The only way to live in this world is to be busier than they are. Prue, I have been busier than they are for 14 years, Cole. And I have heard every story they tell about me. And I have never, not one time, heard a story about me that was true. She turned to him. And the day I heard the story about you, I knew it was not true either. Because I have been the woman the story was wrong about for too long, not I recognized one when I saw one. Cole stood very still. The snow fell between them. The horse stamped in the barn. He set down his coffee on the chopping block. He came across the snow to her. He stopped a step away, close enough that she could see the gray hairs in his beard. Prudence Whitlock, he said, Cole, I have not had hope in 9 years. I know. I think I am beginning to have it back. I know. I am afraid of it. I know. I am afraid of you, of me, of how much I am beginning to want you to stay. She looked at him. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, Cole, yes, you do not have to be afraid. Why not? Because she felt her own throat close. She forced the words through anyway, because I am not going anywhere, not until this is finished. And maybe not even then. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He did not move forward. He did not kiss her. He had not earned it yet, and she had not asked, and they were both old enough in their souls, if not their bodies, to know that. He simply stood there. He simply let her see him, the mountain man. The cursed one, who had buried 7 women. Ho was. In this moment, in front of her, just a man with snow on his shoulders. Prue put her gloved hand on his chest, just over his heart. There, she said. Listen to it. It is still beating. Yes, that means it is not done. No, then we work. She turned. She walked back toward the cabin. He watched her go for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee. Then he followed.
They found the gold 3 days later. Prue was the one who found it. She was checking the row. She did this every morning. She had decided without telling Cole that she would treat each woman as a patient. She would walk to her marker. She would say her name. She would pay her respects. She would think about her death. She would keep her in mind. She was at Cordelia's grave when she stumbled on a stone half buried in the wet ground at the base of the cross. She caught herself. She looked down. Bent brushed the snow and the leaves away. The stone had a strange streak in it, a vein, a bright soft yellow vein, no thicker than a pencil, running through the gray quartz like a piece of thread someone had sewn through it. Prue did not know much about geology. She knew enough. She had grown up in a territory full of men who talked about nothing but this. She picked up the stone. She held it in her palm. She stood there a long moment with the snow falling around her and the row behind her and the stone in her hand. She walked back down to the cabin. She put the stone on the table. Cole came in. Cole looked at the stone. Cole's face changed. Where? He said. Cordelia's grave. Right at the base. Prue, yes, that is gold. Yes, he sat down. He picked up the stone. He turned it over in his fingers. His face went through 3 expressions she could not name and one she could. The last one was rage. He set the stone down. Cole, yes. You told me a man named Crane sold you this land. Obadiah Crane. 1866. He was the preacher in Twin Rivers then. The deed is in that drawer. Get it for me. He got it. It was a piece of yellowed paper, folded into thirds, with a faded ink seal at the bottom. She unfolded it on the table. She read it. She read the witness signatures. The witness was Obadiah Crane. The seller was a man named Hutchins, deceased. The buyer was Cole Ravenheart. The deed was dated April 11th, 1866. Prue ran her fingertip along the witness signature. Obadiah Crane. The handwriting was small, crabbed, slanted hard to the right. She looked at Cole. Did Crane stay in Twin Rivers long? No, he left within the year. He said he was called to a flock back east. Did anyone ever see him again? No, Cole. Yes. What did Obadiah Crane look like? Tall as me, thin, black hair, a scar through his left eyebrow, eyes. Cole frowned. Pale, cold, he stopped. His head came up like ice on a frozen pond, he whispered. Prue sat down. Prue put both hands flat on the table. Prue breathed in. Prue breathed out, Cole. Yes. Silas Thackeray's eyes are exactly like that. The cabin went very quiet. The fire popped. The wind moved across the roof. A piece of snow slid off the eaves and landed with a wet thump. Cole, yes, I think Silas Thackeray and Obadiah Crane are the same man. Cole's face did not change. His face did the opposite of changing. His face went perfectly still. A man's face goes perfectly still when his entire life rearranges itself behind his eyes. He stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the row. He did not say anything a long time. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet, she had to lean forward to hear him. He sold me this land. Yes, he kept the mineral rights, did he not? What do you mean? Cole laughed. It was a terrible laugh, Prue. Prue, look at the deed. Read the bottom line. She read the bottom line. She read it again. And there, in the same crab-slanted hand, a clause survey rights only. Subsurface and mineral rights retained by witnessing party and trust pending discovery. She had missed it the first time. It was tucked in like a coiled snake in a basket of laundry. He sold you the dirt, Cole said. But he kept whatever was under it. For himself, Cole. Yes, that is not legal. Not the way it is written, I know. You would not have known. You were not a lawyer. You were a 25-year-old veteran trying to buy a place to live. I trusted the preacher? Yes, and then I started bringing women up to live on his gold. Yes, he turned from the window. His face was wet. His face was dry. She could not tell which. He did not want them to find it, Cole said. He did not want them to find it. He did not want any of them to live long enough to walk over the ground I was walking over and notice. Yes, he has been killing my wives, to keep me from having an heir who might survive me, to keep the land from passing to a child, to keep it floating loose, so that when I finally died alone, he could come back as a different name and claim it. Yes. Cole closed his eyes. A long shudder went through him from the crown of his head to the soles of his boots. He opened his eyes. I am going down that mountain. Prue stood up. No, Prue, Cole. No, Prue, we do this right. We go to Sheriff Holcomb. We bring the diaries. We bring the deed. We bring the stone. We bring everything. We do not. Go down with our guns drawn. He has been killing my wives. Yes. So we will hang him for it, Prue, Cole. We will hang him for it. Listen to me. We will hang him for it, he looked at her. His shoulders shook. He nodded twice. He sat back down. Prue reached across the table, took his hand, his big scarred working hand. We will hang him for it, she said again. All right.
They packed that night. They were going to ride down at dawn. They would travel light. The stone, the diaries, the deed, the Colt and the Henry rifle, and the satchel of food. Prue tied her hair back tight under her father's old hat. Cole pulled on his oilskin. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, and a clean, cold moon had come up over the ridge. Prue was tightening the cinch on Mercy when Ezekiel the mule lifted his head. The mule's ears went forward. The mule made a sound. A sound mules make when they smell men. Cole came out of the barn fast. Prue, I see him. Get behind something. She got behind the spring house. The Henry was already in her hands. She had not even remembered picking it up down the trail. In the moonlight, a single rider was coming, slow, steady. No hurry, a black coat over a thin frame, a wide-brimmed hat, a horse that was steaming in the cold. The rider stopped at the edge of the meadow. He raised both gloved hands. Mr. Ravenheart, he called. His voice was high, polite, almost musical, carrying easily across the cold air. It is Silas Thackeray. I am alone. I bring no weapons. I have come to talk. Cole's hand was on the Colt. Prue could see the muscle in his jaw move. Cole, she said, very low. Hold, Prue, hold. Silas waited like a man who had all the time in the world. Cole called back. Why? Because Silas's voice was very pleasant. I have come to make you an offer. What offer? To buy your land. The wind moved through the pines. Cole did not answer. Silas raised his hands a little higher. I am cold, Mr. Ravenheart. May I come into the meadow? I will dismount in the open. I will leave my horse 20 feet from your porch. I will speak my... and then I will go. Cole turned his head a half-inch toward the spring house. He did not look at her, but he asked her, in that half-inch, what she thought. Prue thought fast, because Silas had not come up that trail at night. alone in November snow to make a friendly offer. He had come because he had heard that they were leaving in the morning. Heard from whom? There was no whom. There was no one in town who knew. There was only Illy Marsh. 16 years old, Ellie Marsh, whose family lived a half-mile up the eastern fork. Ellie Marsh, who had probably been paid $2 to sit in the woods and watch the cabin, and who had probably ridden home as soon as he saw saddlebags being filled. So Silas knew they were going down. So Silas had come up to take care of it before they could. So Silas was not alone. He could not be alone. Prue's eyes tracked very fast across the dark line of the pines on the far side of the meadow there. A flicker of moonlight on a rifle barrel there, another, lower. Behind a rock there, a third. Off to the right, she did not see Silas's eyes change at all. He kept his hands up, he kept smiling, but she saw the flickers in the dark. She understood. Silas was the bait to draw them out into the meadow, where 3 men with rifles could pick them off at distance. Cole, Prue breathed, without moving her lips much. Ask Springs, get to me, now. He moved. He moved smooth and fast for a man with a half-healed leg. He came around the corner of the spring house just as the first shot went over the place he had been standing. Then Silas Thackeray dropped his polite hands and reached into his coat for a pistol, and the meadow up with muzzle flashes, and the cabin door behind them banged open in the wind, and from somewhere down the trail, a long way down the trail, a horse screamed. And Prue Whitlock pressed her back against the cold logs of the spring house, and worked the lever on the Henry rifle, and did not feel afraid. She felt awake. She felt finally and entirely awake. For the first time in 26 years.
Cole, she said. Yes. How many shells in your Colt? 6. How many in your belt? 12. How many in the rifle? 15 in the Henry. 5 in the sharps in the cabin. Cole, yes. There are 3 of them in the trees and 1 of him in the meadow. Yes, that's 4 men. Yes, we have, between us, more bullets than that. Bullet than that. He looked at her, in the moonlight, in the dark, against the spring house wall. With bullets going past the edge of the logs, he looked at her. And for 1/2 second, Cole Ravenheart smiled. It was a smile that had been waiting 9 years to come back. Yes, Prudence Whitlock, he said. We do. The first shot took a chunk of pine off the corner of the spring house, 6 inches above her head. She did not flinch. She did not flinch because she had stopped being able to flinch sometime around the moment. She lifted a 6-foot cottonwood log and ran at 3 armed men with it. A girl who has done that does not flinch at splinters. She turned to Cole. Her cheek was against the cold logs. Her hat had come off. Her braid had come loose. She looked at him in the moonlight, and she said one thing. You take the trees, you take the meadow. Yes. Prue, what? Do not die. I have no plans. He looked at her 1/2 second longer than he had any business doing in the middle of a gunfight. Then he was gone around the corner of the cabin, low fast, his coat flaring behind him, the Henry rifle in his hand and the Colt at his hip. Prue took a breath. Prue let it out. Prue leaned out around the spring house, and she shot the man in the meadow, not Silas. Prue did not aim at Silas. Prue aimed at the leg of the bay horse Silas had ridden up on. Because a doctor's daughter knew that a man with no horse in the open in November snow at night was a man who would have to come closer to do his work. The horse went down screaming. Silas hit the snow. He rolled. He came up with his pistol. He shot at the spring house. The bullet went wide. Prue worked the lever. She did not shoot back yet because the 3 men in the trees were the real problem. A flicker came. About 30 yards into the pines on the south edge of the meadow. A man rising from a rock to see better. Prue shot him. She heard him fall. She did not enjoy it. She did not have time to feel anything about it. She worked the lever again.
Cole was up the slope of the woodshed roof before any of the men in the trees realized he had moved. He was a big man. He should not have been able to move that fast. But Cole Ravenheart had spent 4 years of his life crawling through Tennessee and Pennsylvania carrying men twice his weight. He had spent 9 years after that splitting wood and breaking horses and carrying his own dead up a hillside to a hole he had dug himself. His leg was half healed. He did not feel his leg. He went up the woodshed and over the top of it, and he dropped down on the far side, and he was running through the pines toward the second muzzle flash before his boots had finished landing. He came around behind the second rifleman. The man was reloading. Cole did not shoot him. Cole hit him in the back of the head with the butt of the Henry. The man went down. Cole stripped his rifle, stripped his belt of cartridges, tied his wrists behind his back with the man's own bandana. took the man's hat, put it on his own head, then Cole. In the second man's hat, stood up where the second man had been standing. The third rifleman, 50 yards across the trees, saw the hat. The third rifleman lifted his hand in a small wave. Cole shot him, not in the chest or in the rifle. The Henry put a .40 caliber round through the breech of the man's gun and ruined it. The man yelped, dropped the weapon, grabbed his hand. Cole was moving before the man had finished yelping. By the time the third man had gotten his pistol clear of his belt, Cole was on him. Cole did not shoot him either. Cole knocked him down. Cole put a knee in his back. Cole looked at him in the moonlight and said, "Who paid you, mister?" "Who paid you, mister? Who paid? You, Thackeray. Silas Thackeray, how much? $10 apiece." Cole closed his eyes for 1/2 second. $10 apiece. $10 apiece for the lives of him and Prue. $10 apiece for the closing of a story Silas Thackeray had been writing for 9 years. Cole opened his eyes. He hit the man one time, hard in the temple. The man stopped moving. He would wake up, eventually, with a headache. Cole had been very precise. Cole stood up. He looked across the meadow. He could see Prue behind the spring house. He could see Silas crawling toward the line of pines with one hand pressed against his side. He could see something else. He could see, on the far side of the meadow, a wagon coming up the trail, slow, careful, a team of 2 horses in the lead, a man on the bench with a long gun across his knees, a second man riding alongside on a roan. A small, thin shape between them on the wagon seat, hands tied, head down. Cole's heart did something that did not feel like a heart. Edmund. It was Edmund. It was Prue's father in the wagon, tied, captive. Brought up the mountain in the night to be used, the man on the bench with the long gun stood up, cupped his hand around his mouth, hollered down the meadow. "Ravenheart," his voice rolled off the trees. "Ravenheart, you come out. Or we put a hole in this old man right here in front of his daughter."
Prue heard it. Prue's whole body went cold. It was the kind of cold a person feels exactly twice in a lifetime, the kind that has nothing to do with weather. The kind that comes from inside the chest and walks out the spine and freezes the air around you for 1 full second. She rose from behind the spring house. She did not put down the rifle. But she rose. The wagon was 100 yards out, just inside the edge of the meadow. The 2 men were dim shapes at that distance, but she could see, the small shape between them. She knew the shape of her father's shoulders. She knew that little forward set of his head. She would have known him from a mile. "Papa," she said. The word came out so small. She had not said the word that small since she was 11 and her mother was dying. Cole, on the other side of the meadow, was already moving back toward her along the line of trees. He came up behind the cabin. He came up behind her. He put his hand, light, just light, on her shoulder. "Prue, I see him. Prue, look at me." She looked at him. His face was streaked with gunpowder. His beard was dark with sweat. His silver eyes were lit up like coals. "Prue, stay calm. He is my father, I know. He is my only family." He squeezed her shoulder. "Then let us not let them hurt him," she breathed. She nodded. The man on the wagon hollered again. "Ravenheart, Whitlock, you come out in the open with your hands up. Both of you, right now, or we shoot the doctor." Cole leaned in close. "Prue, yes, there is a third man with them." "Where?" "Crouched. I saw him when they came around the bend." "All right, I have an idea. Tell me." "You walk out." "Cole, Prue, listen. You walk out, hands up, slow. They are going to want both of us. They are going to ask, 'Where is Ravenheart?' You tell them I went down the back trail to fetch the sheriff. They will not believe you. They will believe you enough, Cole, and while they are looking at you, I am going to go around the back of the meadow. I am going to come up behind that wagon. I am going to take the man behind it, then the man on the bench. Then I am going to get your father out of that wagon." "Cole, yes, that is the worst plan I have ever heard. Yes, I love it. All right, Cole, yes. If they shoot me before you there, you get my father home. You hear me? You get him home to Twin Rivers. You get him to bed. You sit with him. You tell him I was not afraid." Cole looked at her. His mouth was a hard line. "I promise you, Prudence Whitlock, that I will get your father home if it kills me, and it had better not, because we are not done." All right, Cole, yes, after this is done. You are going to teach me to shoot a sharps." He almost laughed. "I will teach you to shoot a sharps." "All right." She stepped out from behind the spring house. She stepped out into the moonlight. She raised her hands. The Henry rifle hung from one of them by the trigger guard like a dead bird. She walked out into the middle of the meadow, walking very slowly across the snow toward the wagon.
Edmund Whitlock saw her first. His head came up. His eyes found her in the moonlight. His chin began to shake. He shouted, or tried to, "Prudence! Do not!" The man on the bench hit him on the side of the head with the butt of the long gun. Edmund slumped sideways. He did not fall off the wagon, but his head hung, and blood, dark in the moonlight, ran down from his hairline to his beard. Prue kept walking. She did not run. She did not stop. She had stitched men back together in worse light than this. She knew how much blood a scalp wound made. She knew her father was alive. She knew he would still be alive in 2 minutes if she kept her head. She kept walking. The man on the bench stood up. He pointed the long gun at her. "That is far enough." She stopped, 20 yards from the wagon. "Where is Ravenheart?" "Down the back trail." "He went for the sheriff." The man laughed. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to believe what you want to believe. Whether you believe it does not change where he is." The man stared at her. Prue kept her hands up. She kept her face calm. Inside her chest she was counting horses. There were 3 horses near the wagon, the team, the roan. There was no fourth. The third man Cole had mentioned was on foot, crouched somewhere, behind the wagon, or under it, or off in the brush. She let her eyes drift very lazily. Across the back of the wagon, she did not see him. That was good. That was very good, because if she could not see him, neither could he see her clearly. The man on the bench cocked the long gun, dropped the rifle. Prue let the Henry fall. It hit the snow with a small soft thump. "Walk forward." Prue walked forward. She walked 5 steps. She was now 10 yards from the wagon. She was close enough to see her father's face. His left eye was already swelling. His lip was split. The blood from his temple had gone past his ear and into his collar, but his chest was moving, slow, steady. He was alive. She was here. Cole was somewhere out in the dark. She had a job to do. The job was time. The job was to give Cole every second she could. So Prue did the only thing she had ever been able to do in a crisis. Prue talked. "Mister?" "Shut up, mister, I want to ask you something." "Shut up. How much did Silas pay you?" The man on the bench laughed. "What? How much did Silas Thackeray pay you to ride up here in the middle of the night and put a knot on a country doctor?" "Lady." "Shut up. $20, lady. 40, lady. I will, because there is gold under this mountain, mister." The man on the bench went still. The roan tossed his head. The man on the roan, who had been silent up to now, said, "What?" "I said Prue, there is gold under this mountain. Silas Thackeray has been killing my friend Cole's wives for 9 years to keep him from settling down on it. There is a vein right at the foot of the row up there. I found a piece of it 3 days ago. I have got it in my coat pocket right now." The man on the bench looked at the man on the roan. The man on the roan looked at the man on the bench. The two of them looked at each other for 1 second too long. Prue watched their eyes. She had them, greed. "It was the easiest thing in the world to plant. You only needed to give it 1 minute of air, lady," said the man on the bench. "Show me the piece with my hand in my pocket. Slow, slow, do not move, otherwise I will not." She lowered one hand. Slow, she put it in the pocket of her father's greatcoat. She wrapped her fingers around the stone with the vein of gold in it. She lifted it out. She held it up. The moonlight caught the vein, a bright, soft yellow line. No thicker than a pencil, in a piece of gray quartz the size of a chicken's egg. Both men leaned forward, both of them. "It was so easy. Toss it here," said the man on the bench. "All right, slow, slow." She did not toss it. She did not toss it because if she tossed it, the moment of attention would end. She held it up higher. She turned it a little. She let the moonlight run down the vein. "There is more of it," she said. "There is a whole streak." Right there at the base of those crosses up there, both men were looking at the stone. For 1 full second, that second was all Cole needed.
The man behind the wagon never made a sound. Cole came up out of the brush behind him. Cole's left hand went over his mouth. Cole's right elbow went into the soft place at the back of his neck. The man went down. Cole caught him. Cole laid him in the snow. Cole tied his wrists with a length of rawhide. The whole business took 11 seconds. Then Cole was up against the back of the wagon. He could see Prue's hand, holding the stone. Up in the moonlight he could see Edmund. He could see on the bench the man with the long gun. Leaning forward, he could see on the roan the second man. Also leaning forward, Cole moved. He moved between the wagon and the roan. He moved like a man who had been waiting 9 years to move. He came up under the man on the roan and yanked him out of the saddle by the belt. The man hit the snow. The man started to yell. Cole hit him once in the throat, not to kill him, to stop the yell. Then Cole's was up. Then Cole had the man's pistol out of his belt. Then Cole was around the back of the wagon. Then Cole said, "Quiet, calm." right behind the head of the man on the bench. Drop it. The man on the bench dropped it. The long gun fell into the wagon bed. Prue took 2 steps forward and grabbed her father's arm. Papa, Prudence, Papa, look at me. Edmund's eyes opened a slit. You came, I came. Stupid girl, yes, he smiled. She cut the ropes on his wrists. She lifted him down. She carried him in her arms across the snow to the spring house. He weighed everything. She set him down with his back against the house wall, and she pressed her glove against the cut on his temple, and she said, Papa, stay awake, trying, try harder, trying, daughter. She kissed his forehead, his eyes closed, then opened. He was alive, he was hers. She turned around. Cole had the man on the bench down on his knees in the snow. Cole had the man's own pistol pressed to the back of his head. The other 2 were tied. 3 men, tied, disarmed, kneeling in a row. Cole looked at Prue across the meadow. Prue, yes, where is he? Where is who? Silas. She looked. She looked at the place in the trees where Silas had crawled. She did not see him. She did not see him because he was gone. He had used the 2 minutes of the wagon. He had used the 2 minutes of the gold story. He had used every second she had given Cole, and he had used those same seconds for himself. He had crawled into the trees. He had gotten away. For 1/2 second, Prue thought she might scream. Then she thought, then she did not, because a horse. A horse coming up the trail, slow, steady. From the direction of town, a horse and another horse, 2 horses, 3, a whole party. Prue's heart climbed up into her throat. She turned the Henry that way. Cole turned his pistol that way. The first rider came around the bend. He was wearing a long oilskin and a wide hat. He had a star on his coat. It was Sheriff Jeremiah Holcomb. Behind him were 4 deputies and an old man on a slow horse with a leather satchel across his pommel. The old man was Pete Ashworth, the same Pete Ashworth who had stopped them on Main Street as they left. He pulled his horse up at the edge of the meadow, and he looked at the bodies in the snow, and the men kneeling tied, and Edmund slumped against the spring house, and Prue, with the rifle, and Cole with the pistol, and the wagon and the dead horse and the row up the slopesump. He took off his hat. He said, I came to tell you, Silas Thackeray is Obadiah Crane. I have the papers. Pete Ashworth had not slept in 2 days. He told them this later, in the cabin, with his hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee, and Edmund Whitlock laid out on the bed with bandages around his head. He told them how he had gone home the day Prue and Cole left town, how he had not been able to sleep that night, how he had gotten up at 3 in the morning and gone down to the land office and lit a lamp and started pulling deeds. How he had gone back to 1865, how he had gone back to 1864, how he had gone back to old Union Army records that a friend of his had sent him from St. Louis. Papers with a list of officers court-martialed and discharged in disgrace for a bloody irregular action down in Missouri. Papers with a name on them, Obadiah Crane. How he had compared the signature on those papers to the signature on Cole Ravenhart's deed. How they were the same, right down to the slant of the C and the loop of the R. How he had then gone to look at the signature of Silas Thackeray on the saloon ledger from 1867 when Silas had bought into the property. How that signature was a careful adult disguise, but was still underneath the same hand. The same hand on 3 different documents over 20 years. The same man, Pete Ashworth, who had stayed up 2 nights stacking proof. Pete Ashworth, who had walked to the sheriff's office at sundown that very evening and put the papers on Sheriff Holcomb's desk. Tepout Ashworth, who had said, Jeremiah, there is a murderer in our town, and he has been here a long time. And Sheriff Jeremiah Holcomb, who had looked at the papers, who had looked at them for 10 minutes, who had looked up, who had said, saddle the horses, who had ridden up the mountain that very night with 4 deputies and 1 elderly bookkeep who refused to be left behind, who had heard the gunfire when they were still a mile down the trail, who had ridden harder, who had arrived in time to see Prue lift a stone in the moonlight.
They tied the 3 men in the snow to the back of a horse. They sent a deputy down the back trail fast to chase Silas Thackeray if he could be chased. The deputy did not catch him, but the deputy met a snowstorm. The snowstorm pinned Silas Thackeray against the line of a frozen creek. The snowstorm caught him. The deputy caught him at dawn at the bottom of a draw, where Silas had tried to cross a stream and gone through the ice and been unable to climb back out because his coat had soaked through and gone heavy. The deputy fished him out with a rope. The deputy did not have to shoot him. The deputy brought him back to Twin Rivers tied to the back of his own saddle, blue with cold, alive enough to hang. The trial took 8 days, 8 days of testimony, 8 days of evidence, 8 days of Prue, in her best plain blue dress, sitting at the back of the courtroom holding her Fulfer's hand. 8 days of Cole in a clean shirt, sitting 1 row in front of her. 8 days of Sheriff Holcomb laying out documents, 8 days of Pete Ashworth reading signatures. 8 days of the diaries. Prue read the diaries herself. She stood up in front of the courtroom, and she read them in the order the women had died. She did not read Lillian's. There was no Lillian's. Lillian had died of childbed fever, and there had been no man in a black coat at her door. Lillian had simply been the first wife, the trial run, the proof that Cole could be made to bury someone and survive it. Prue read Cordelia's last entry to a silent room, a man at the door, a black coat, a strange smile, a walk on Sunday, lightning. She was halfway through the entry when Eli Marsh, 16 years old, sitting in the second row with his cap in his hands, began to weep. Ellie Marsh stood up. In the middle of the testimony, Ellie Marsh said, "Sir, Your Honor." "Sir, I have to say something." The judge looked at him. "Son, I have to say something." "Then say it." Ellie Marsh wiped his face with his sleeve. "Mr. Thackeray paid me," he said, "last week. He paid me $2 to watch the doctor's house. He paid me $2 to ride up the Eastern Fork and tell him when Miss Whitlock and Mr. Ravenheart were leaving for the mountain. He paid me. I took it. I should not have. I did not know." Ellie Marsh sat down. Ellie Marsh put his face in his hands. The whole courtroom was silent. Prue, in her blue dress, looked at the boy. Prue thought, "You should not have, but also you came forward." Prue did not say anything out loud. Prue only nodded at him, very slightly, when his eyes came up looking for forgiveness. His shoulders shook. He stayed for the rest of the trial, every day.
Silas Thackeray, on the 8th day, was brought up to be sentenced. He looked smaller than Prue remembered. His black coat was gone. He was in prison gray. His pale eyes were sunken. His mouth was set hard. The judge asked if he had anything to say. Silas looked at Cole. Silas smiled. Silas said, "I almost won." Cole did not move. Cole had not moved in 8 days. Cole had sat in the same row, in the same shirt, with his hands folded on his knees. Like a man who had been told the only way through the fire was to walk, he looked at Silas. He looked at Silas a long time. He said, very quietly, "You almost won." You did not. The judge struck the gavel. The sentence was hanging. It was carried out 2 days later. Cole did not. Prue did not go. Edmund did not go. Pete Ashworth did not go. Sheriff Holcomb stood at the foot of the platform with his hat in his hand and watched Silas Thackeray die. He came to the surgery afterward. He stood at Prue's door and he said, "It is done," Prue said. "Thank you, Sheriff," he said. "Miss Whitlock," she said. Yes, he said. "I have called you many things in my own head over the years. None of them were true. I came to apologize." Prue looked at him. Prue, who had heard Sheriff Jeremiah Holcomb laugh at one of Hank Dobbs's jokes about her 3 years ago in this very surgery when she had set his collarbone after a fall from a horse. Prue said, "Sheriff, miss, thank you." She did not say more. Forgiveness is not always a speech. Sometimes forgiveness is a closed mouth and an open door. She gave him both. He nodded. He left.
The morning after the hanging, Prue and Cole rode back up to Black Hollow Ridge. It was a clear blue morning. The first hard freeze had come and gone. The snow was packed firm under the horses. They went up to the row. Prue had brought flowers. She had bought them from Mrs. Hatchett, who had wept openly at the counter and had refused to take her money. Cole stood at each grave in turn. He did not kneel. He stood. He said each name out loud. Lillian, Adelaide Beatrice Constance Maribel, Henrietta Cordelia. He said after each one, "I am sorry. He is paid. You can rest." When he came to the last one he stopped. He stood there a long time. Prue did not crowd him. Prue waited. Cole knelt at last. He pressed his palm flat to the cold earth. He said, "Cordy, he is dead. You can stop walking up the trail looking for me. You can lie down." Prue's eyes burned. Her eyes burned, and she did not pretend they did not. She wiped them on her glove. When Cole stood up, his face was wet too. He turned to her. "Prue, yes, I have something to ask. Ask. It is not a small thing." "All right." He took off his hat. He held it against his chest. The wind moved his hair. "Prudence Whitlock. Cole Ravenheart, I have buried 7 women on this ridge. I will not bury an 8th. I want you to understand that. If you cannot promise me you will not die on me, you can ride down the mountain right now and I will not blame you and I will sit here alone for the rest of my life." All right, Prue, I cannot promise you. I will not die, Cole. Nobody can promise that, I know, but I can promise you. I will not die quietly. I will not die without a fight. I will not let any storm or any horse or any man in a black coat take me from you without me leaving a hole in the world the size of an ox cart on the way out. He looked at her. He laughed. It was a real laugh this time. All the way out, yes, he said. I believe that. Then we are agreed. Then we are agreed. He stepped to her. He stopped the way he had stopped that day in the snow at the spring. He did not move the last 6 inches. He waited for her to choose. Prue put her hands on either side of his face. His beard was rough under her gloves. Cole, she said. Yes, I am going to kiss you now. Yes, she kissed him. The first time was very soft. The second time was not soft. The second time was a woman who had been told, by every voice in her town for 14 years, that nobody would ever choose her, kissing the man who had chosen her in front of his 7 dead. He put his arms around her. He held her so tight, her ribs creaked. She held him back just as hard. The wind moved across the ridge. The crosses stood in their row. The sun came over the eastern shoulder of the mountain and laid a long line of light across the snow. They were married in May, late May. The lupine was up. The aspen leaves were the size of mouse ears. The creek was running brown and high with snowmelt. The wedding was at Edmund's surgery. The surgery had been swept and washed. The examination table had been pushed against the wall and covered with a clean white cloth. There were wildflowers in jars on a windowsill. Cole wore a black coat that had been Edmund's. Because Edmund and Cole were almost the same shoulder width, if not the same height, and Prue had sat for 2 evenings with a needle adjusting the sleeves. Prue wore a blue dress she had made herself. It was not the white dress most brides wore. She had not wanted white. She had told Cole, I am not a girl, Cole. I am a doctor and a woman who has shot a man to keep him from killing my father. I am not getting married in a girl's dress, he had said. Wear blue, she had said. I will. She did. The dress was the color of a deep, clear winter sky, and her braid was crowned with lupine, and her boots were clean. She walked down the short aisle on her father's arm. Edmund was thinner than he had been the autumn before. The cut on his temple had left a small white scar. He used a cane now in cold weather, but he walked his daughter down the aisle the way he had walked her into surgery the first time when she was 9 and showed her how to wash her hands. He gave her hand to Cole. He said to Cole very low, Take care of her, Cole said. She takes care of me. Edmund laughed. Edmund said, Yes, that is also true. The minister was a young man up from Cheyenne, a real one this time, with real papers. A man Sheriff Holcomb had personally vetted. The minister read the vows. Cole said, I do. His voice did not shake. Prue said, I do. Hers did not either. When the minister said, You may kiss the bride, Cole said, She will kiss me. Prue laughed out loud. She kissed him. The room broke into applause. Mrs. Hatchett wept openly. Pete Ashworth, in a clean black suit nearly as old as he was, blew his nose into a handkerchief. Ellie Marsh, 17 now, stood at the back, holding his cap in both hands. His eyes were wet. Prue saw him. She crossed the room afterward and she stood in front of him. She said, Eli, he said. Mrs. Ravenheart. She said, Prue is fine, he said. Prue, she said. Are you all right, he said. Yes, ma'am. I came to wish you well. I came to be a witness, she said. Come to dinner sometime. There is always work on a homestead. He looked up at her fast. He said, Truly, she said. Truslet, she said. I will. He came. He came every other Sunday for the rest of his life. He learned to fix things. He learned to read a deed. He learned eventually to read a diary and to be careful what a young woman tells you when she is alone in a cabin with a stranger at the door.
The cabin on Black Hollow Ridge changed slowly. Prue would not let Cole tear it down. She said it had been the home of 7 good women and that they had a right to have it stay standing, but she rearranged. She moved the bed to the loft. She turned the downstairs into a kitchen and a small examination room. She had Cole rebuild the staircase entirely, with Pete Ashworth supervising, every brace inspected and replaced. She put the 7 wedding dresses, very carefully, into the cedar trunk in the loft. She wrapped each in fresh paper. She did not throw them out, she said. They are part of us now, Cole. I will not pretend they are not, he said. Thank you, he said it small. He said it like a man who had just been forgiven a great debt by someone he had not realized was holding it. The mineral rights were settled by the territory. It took a year. The court found that the clause in the original deed had been forged by Obadiah Crane and was void from the start. The land, all of it, top and bottom, dirt and gold, belonged to Cole. Cole sold a small share of the gold to a mining company in Cheyenne. Cole gave half of what he made to a women's hospital that had just opened in Laramie. Cole gave the other half to Prue, who gave most of it to her father, who used it to buy proper medical books and a new microscope and to hire a second doctor so that nobody in Twin Rivers would ever again have to choose between waiting for help and saving a life themselves. Cole and Prue kept enough to live on. They did not need much. They had each other. They had Edmund, who came up the mountain 4 times a year in good weather until his last summer, when he went peacefully in his bed in his own home with Prue's hand in one of his is in Cole's hands. They had a son. They named him Edmund. They had a daughter. They named her Mercy, after the chestnut mare. They had another daughter. They named her Hope. Cole laughed when she was born. Cole laughed and could not stop. Prue, exhausted in the bed in the loft, said, "What?" Cole said. "I waited so long for this. I waited so long for this name. I am keeping it."
When Prue Ravenheart was an old woman with white hair and a strong straight back and forearms like a blacksmith's, she sat on the porch of the cabin one summer evening, and a young writer from a magazine in Denver came up the trail to interview her for a piece on the women of the old territories. Cole had gone 10 years before. He had gone old in his bed. With her hand in his, he had said at the end, "Prue," she had said. "Yes," he had said. "Thank you," she had said. "For what?" he had said. "For walking up that mountain," she had said. "I would do it again." He had smiled. He had closed his eyes. He had gone. She had buried him on the slope above the cabin. She had not buried him in the row. She had buried him a little apart, lower down where the lupine grew thick and the morning sun came earliest. She had told him she would lie there with him when her time came. The young writer from Denver, sitting on the porch on the summer evening, had a notebook in her lap. The young writer asked her what she had learned in her long life. From the year she went up the mountain with the cursed man, Prue thought about it a long time. She looked out across the meadow. The crosses still stood, weathered now. At the top of the slope, a breeze moved through the lupine. Prue smiled. "Slow. I learn," she said, "that the worst lies people tell are the lies they tell about other people. I learned that a town will believe a story about a man for 9 years rather than walk up a mountain and ask him a question." The young writer wrote it down. "I learned that fear is the cheapest way to control people. It is cheaper than money, cheaper than a gun. You only have to whisper, and the rest of the town does the work for you." The young writer wrote that down too. "And I learned," Prue said, "that if you just decide to walk into the story instead of around it, you will find out almost every time that the monster in it is a frightened man. And the man being called the monster is just a man who has lost too much." She paused for a long time. The young writer waited. "Look at people," Prue said at last. "Just look at them. Not the story about them, the person. And if a town tells you somebody is cursed, ask who profits from you believing it. There is always somebody profiting." She paused again. "And if you find a man on the ground bleeding," she said, "you pick him up. You do not ask whose fault it is. You pick him up, you take him home. You feed him supper, and you find out who hurt him later." She closed her eyes. She listened to the wind. The wind on the ridge sounded the way it had sounded the night she had lifted a 6-foot cottonwood log and run with it at 3 armed men. It sounded like a woman breathing in, and it sounded like a woman breathing out, and it sounded like a long life lived honestly. The very last breath.